I couldn't do it. Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Jamie and today I'm going to be doing a monthly reading wrap up, or what I read in the month of August. So in the past I've been doing these kind of videos on my TikTok channel, but I have been finding it increasingly hard to post on TikTok, especially long videos. There's a 10-minute feature, but if the video is over 3 minutes, then I don't know if it's my phone or the TikTok in-app editor, I cannot do it. It starts to lag. It's just really frustrating, really hard to do. It's also hard to get my thoughts out, even in 10 minutes. I basically go, I read this book, I liked it, I didn't like it. I also decided to go on a bit of a social media break. I had to delete all of the apps off of my phone. Obviously, YouTube's not included in that. But basically, I was getting very frustrated with my ingestment of content. I would sit and scroll, but get frustrated that the things I was looking at were not engaging enough, and then I would get mad at myself for just constantly scrolling rather than like being able to sit down and enjoy something or engage with content. I also started getting into TikTok fights, but I wasn't like actually posting or commenting anything. I was just like having the fight with myself because of a TikTok video I saw that enraged me, I guess. It got to a point where it was like really, really slow and I was the only person in the office. So I was just talking out loud to myself, pretending I was making TikTok videos about discourse that I would never actually post. Because of all of that, I'm taking a break from TikTok. And I thought if I'm not going to be doing wrap-up videos on TikTok, I might do them here. So without further ado, here is what I read in the month of August. That is my window blinds. Oops. Something I have been doing is reading my physical TBR. I know. I'm so proud of myself. I'm actually doing my physical TBR. Can you believe it? I've talked previously before about reading challenges and like having a TBR challenge or something like that. It always gets me anxious. It always makes me like feel weird. I start getting frustrated with the books because I can't be consistent, I guess. I'm not sure what it is. I think I'm just bad at reading. For some reason, I get anxious when I have a lot of books on my physical TBR that I haven't read yet as well. So I kind of got stuck in this thing where I had a lot of books because I went on a few book buying sprees, but then I kind of forgot that I had to read them, so they were just a pile of books on my floor that I hadn't read, which made me super anxious. And I don't know at what point it was, but I realized I'm planning to move in a few months. I really didn't want to pack up this entire giant stack of books and then read them after moving, like unpack and read them and then unhaul them in a completely different state. So I'm trying to get through them now, and that motivation so far has been helping me sit down and read, or DNF if I need to DNF, and we'll get into that. The first book I read in the month of August is The Witness for the Dead by Catherine Addison. Yes, Catherine Addison. She also goes by a different pen name. Hold on, what is the other pen name? Sarah Manette. She is the author of different series. Okay, so she's written a few books under different names and with different co-authors, I believe. The Witness for the Dead is an offshoot of another series she has written. So there is the series, The Goblin Emperor. This says on the cover, I don't know if you can see, in the same universe or in the world of the Goblin Emperor. So I had no idea if this was like a direct sequel, because I don't know what it is about book publishers and marketing, but they love to have a sequel without telling you it's a sequel. And so they don't put like the number 2. They don't say like sequel to so-and-so. They just say like in the world of, or also by this author. And then you're sitting there and you're reading, and nothing makes sense. And you're like, what happened? And then you realize it's a sequel. So I didn't know if it was something like that or if this was truly an offshoot of a series. Now, this book does seem to be an offshoot, like it's in the same universe. They do callbacks to the other series, but it is like the same main character. So it's like that series happened and then here's the new adventures of the same character, I guess. I haven't read The Goblin Emperor, so I don't know for sure. Basically, the simplest way to describe this book is Murdoch from Murdoch Mysteries had necromancy powers. It took me a really long time to really understand the implied time period of this world because it's fantasy, and most fantasy is like Dark Ages medieval Europe. But then they were talking about like oil lanterns and tea houses, operas, gambling dens. And I think it's supposed to be more of a Victorian turn of the century time period with like suits and operas and stuff like that. And this is very much a procedural detective show. The main character, what's his name? Kelahar, something like that. Selahar is a witness for the dead, or the witness for the dead, which means he has the power to talk to recently deceased people. He doesn't like get their ghosts back or anything. He doesn't like raise them from the dead. It's more like he can see their last moments, feel their last feelings, hear their last thoughts. It's very limited. I'm not super sure how limited it is, but you know, that kind of whisper of necromancy, if that makes sense. So people basically petition him to settle some grievances, hear what their last words were of their recently deceased parent. In certain cases, if a person washes up on shore, they use his power to figure out who she may have been, how she died, and that's what this one is about. It does have a very interesting world. I can tell that this world is very in-depth, especially in the author's mind. Because I didn't read the original series, I don't know if this is a flaw of the author and her writing, or because this is supposed to be an offshoot and it's assumed you've read the original book. But it was very hard to understand the world because of the way it was described, basically. It just kind of exists, which is good. It was well written. It was very in-depth. It was very creative. I really liked it. But it's also like we focused on a lot of unnecessary things, like the names of certain streets, rather than like the hierarchy that, again, may or may not have been explained in the original series. But I didn't read the original series because I got this from Dollar Tree. Oh, by the way, this is a Dollar Tree book review. It does meander a little bit. He goes on a couple side quests, and to a certain extent, the reason he goes on the side quests are connected to the main story. But they were dumb. And the fact that he goes on them was unnecessary, and looking at them, watching them happen was super unnecessary. Like, he literally fights a ghoul and goes and stays in a haunted park, and that has nothing to do with the original story. We didn't need this. It felt like filler. Also, this book has a proper noun problem. There's that joke in fantasy sci-fi stories and worlds that the first 50 pages is just a bunch of nonsense words because they're trying to world build, but because it's a different world with a different language, all of the words don't mean anything to you. And so then you're sitting there trying to figure out what everything is and what it means. That happens for like the first 50% of the book. I highlighted all of the proper nouns, anything that was capitalized, and it was just so confusing, especially for the first chapter, because it is very, not info dumpy, but very world building heavy, and it's very hard to understand. At least for me, it was hard to understand. But anyway, once I got past that and got more into the writing and understanding how the world was, that didn't bother me as much. But in the very beginning, I was so annoyed by it. Essentially, I really liked the concept. I really liked the idea of a necromancer being a detective, and the world building felt in-depth and important. So it's something where I would definitely read the rest of the books and more of the author's work, but I'm not desperate for it. I'm not going to go read it right now. Hana carries on by Uzma, Jalaluddin. Uzma Jalaluddin. I'm certain I am pronouncing that wrong. I'm sorry. This is a contemporary romance about a hijabi woman in Toronto, Canada. Kind of like at the crossroads of her life. She's worked all her life in her family's restaurant, which is starting to fail. It really hasn't been making a profit recently. She really, really wants to be in radio broadcasting, although radio broadcasting is kind of a dying medium. And then also the fact that she's brown in a very white area. Toronto, I guess Toronto is a very diverse area because it's a big city, but you know, it's being a minority in a big city. On top of all of the like internal conflicts, a new restaurant has opened up across the street that serves basically the same thing they do. Well, not basically the same thing. It's also a halal restaurant, which is one of the reasons her restaurant has stayed open so long, is because it's like the only halal restaurant in the area. This is very important competition, and the guy running it becomes like some sort of frenemy competition guy. He's kind of rude to her at first, you know, that kind of stuff. There are a few other tropes, like she starts communicating with this secret guy on the interwebs, and they both keep their identities secret, but she's starting to fall for him, and we're like, oh, I wonder who this guy is. He seems like the perfect match, like they're best friends. When will he show his face? We kind of already knew where it was going. It's kind of enemies to lovers, more like rivals to lovers, but I do like this because it seems like there are real stakes. I mean, the stakes were never too high, but it seems like there were real stakes of like, you know, this is her family's livelihood. So of course, if he is really an asshole and really trying to put them out of business, like he would be an enemy. It was very readable. I do not read contemporary romances, or if I do, I usually don't enjoy them. So I was very surprised how into this book I was. It was very well paced. I never felt like anything was super unnecessary or dragging on. I highly enjoyed the book, and I want to read more of contemporary romances, especially by authors like this, where it's a very interesting and readable book, even though it's like kind of chonky for a romance, don't you think? Oops, sorry. Sistersong by Lucy Holland. All cards on the table, I DNF'd this. This was on my physical TBR, well, even my non-physical TBR, my like list of books that I want to read for a very, very long time. I saw a video on TikTok that was recommending books that were about mythology but were not Greek mythology, because Greek mythology retellings are like really big right now. And this was advertised as a Celtic/British mythology book. And I love Celtic mythology and folklore. I love Anglo-British Isles, stuff like that. Basically, that's all I knew getting into this book, is that it was Celtic British mythology. I keep saying Celtic, I think because of the, like, Celtic knots on there, but it's not exactly Celtic. I know there is a difference. The story is about 3 siblings, and they live in a time period where they have magic, like the pagan old ways are still known and still practiced, but it's that transitional time as Christianity takes over. And as the mean preacher tries to convert everyone, the magic that they've all felt and known and been able to use is starting to be lost because of the loss of faith. Conversations of religion, especially Christianity, do make me a bit uncomfortable due to some of my own experiences with religious people and conversations with them. So that already made me kind of like wary. I wasn't really interested in that kind of conflict. It just made me feel uncomfortable. But then on top of that, the other very important conflict is like relationship drama between 2 sisters. Imagine having the same type as your sister. Like that, I can't even imagine that. At that point in time, though, it was really, really slim pickings. So I got about halfway, and it felt like the story hadn't even started. Like, yes, there was an inciting incident. Yes, there were relationships being built. Yes, they were doing things. But it never felt like I had fully started the book. Like I was still in the beginning of the book halfway through. And it's a long book. It was very obvious that one of the characters, Kian, I think it's pronounced Kian, it might be pronounced something else, but Kian was very obviously the author's favorite character to write, because even chapters that were not in Kian's point of view were often talking about Kian. Kian had the most interesting chapters. Things were happening most often in Kian's chapters. The language of this book was very mixed for me, because on the one hand, they were trying to have like very old-timey, folklorish sounding descriptions, and inner monologues were supposed to sound like old-timey.
Sorry.
But then specifically the bickering of the siblings sounded very modern. I don't know how to explain it. Just like it gave this weird mix of like old-timey and modern dialect, and I didn't like that. Some good things about this book is it does have some trans representation. Now, Kian does get misgendered in everybody else's point of view because at this point in time, his identity is not accepted, and so he's being forced to wear dresses. All of his sisters refer to him with she, her pronouns and things like that. And there's only like one person that sees him for who he truly is. So if you are a trans person that does not like to see people getting misgendered and things like that, maybe skip it. But also if you're okay with that and just want to read trans representation, then there's this book, Old-Timey Trans Representation. This is supposed to be a retelling of a myth. And I looked it up because I was like, I just don't know what myth this is supposed to be about. Apparently it's the Two Sisters, or the Trois Sisters as it's often called. I didn't think I knew that myth, so I looked into it. And it is a song about two sisters who fight over a romantic interest, and one of the sisters pushes the other one into the river. She drowns, she dies, her body is washed up on the banks of the river. Somebody else comes along and makes a musical instrument out of her body. After seeing that, I realized I knew this story because of Dave Malloy's Ghost Quartet musical. The end song, Wind and Rain, well, kind of the whole musical, but especially the end song, Wind and Rain, is a retelling of that. And maybe it's just because that specific song is very Appalachian. Could not imagine that story in the setting of like pre-Christian British Isles, you know, like that is weird. Also, I was at the halfway point, and I guess you could say the sisters fighting over a man was part of the song and the myth. But I was at the halfway point and I didn't see the story. Once I realized what the retelling was, it didn't make me want to go back and finish the book. Like at that point I had already DNF'd and I was writing my notes and I was like, oh, by the way, what is the myth that it's retelling? So I looked it up, and it, you know, knowing the myth did not make me want to go back. It actually solidified the idea that DNFing was the right decision. Firekeeper's Daughter by Angeline Booley. This has been on my physical TBR the longest. I think I bought this probably May or June of last year, and I only read it in August. So it's been on my physical TBR, my physical pile of books that I need to read for more than a year. So even after picking it from my like mystery TBR jar, I waited like 3 days to read it because I was so anxious. I was so hesitant. The reason I hadn't picked it up is because everyone was telling me Firekeeper's Daughter is amazing. Firekeeper's Daughter is like the best book. It's such an amazing story. Maybe it's because I'm a hipster and I don't like reading popular books, but something about knowing everyone else loves a book makes me think like, oh my God, I'm not gonna like it. It's not gonna live up to the expectations. I'm gonna hate it. And then I don't know. And unfortunately, that happened here. This is about a young half-native girl named Donis, who is finding her place between the communities. She lives in an area where there's a huge native population with like a reservation, native land, and then like a big non-native city. And she kind of is split between the two because she is native, but she's also living with her non-native family. Eventually she meets a guy. She's thrust into this weird drug ring investigation with meth and all of that. And there is just so much going on in this book. There's so many layers of things that are happening because it's like Donis is 18 trying to transition into adult life, but she's also trying to find her place between the native community that she wants to be a part of and the non-native community that does not want her to be a part of the native community. So she feels like she has to stay with her family in the area, but she wants to like go on to college, to a different, better college. And then you've got the whole drug thing, then you've got the whole guy thing, and then you've got the whole hockey thing, and it's just a lot of things that are kind of muddling together where nothing really fully shines through. It does have some strengths and weaknesses, like every book does. The biggest strength, in my opinion, is the indigenous representation. The part parts of this book that felt the most alive and most cared for are the explanations of Native, specifically, I'm going to get it wrong, Ojibwe culture and practices. Anishinaabe. They were vivid, they were well explained. Grief is also a very big strength of this book. The explanations of grief, how a person deals with it, seeing people that you love go through the various stages of grief. It was an excellent depiction of a very complex emotion, so those were some of the strengths. A weakness were the character relationships. We were told that a lot of people were important to Donis, but I never really felt like all of them were really important to her. I really only felt it with, like, Jamie. By the way, very weird to read a character with your name spelled exactly the same way. I really only felt her character relationships being truly in depth with Jamie and I think a few of the elders of the Native community. I never once believed that she was close to her brother, Levi. She says it over and over that she and Levi are really close. And I don't know the best way for the author to fix this, to remedy it. Maybe it's just because I don't have a brother, but like seeing their interactions, they felt so stilted and so at arm's length that when it became important that she was close to her brother, I didn't believe it. And it basically ruined that part of the story for me. Things like her relationship with her non-Native family, she's supposed to be really close. She was raised by her white mother and basically given so much because her grandparents were really rich and she's supposedly really close with them. And you know, there's that whole through line of what are you supposed to do when these people, they say they love you, but there's just a part of you that they don't love because they are racist and don't like that she is indigenous, especially since it was like a whole scandal. Her birth was a whole scandal. But her grandfather is already out of the picture. Her grandmother is basically in a vegetative state. Her white mother and white uncle were always caring and always there for her and supportive of her. So it never felt like that side of the family was never a real conflict for her. Another weakness is the dialogue. I just found it really cringy. It is set in 2004, 2005, so maybe this is how teenagers talked back then. I don't know. I was 4 and 5 years old, but it was just super cringe. And the romantic scenes were super cringy. And I don't know how to remedy that. It wasn't for me. Now, this might enter into some spoiler sections. I'll try not to be spoilery, but this book does something that I think is very common in thrillers, where the entire book is pretty realistic. The investigation is realistic, but then it just like jumps off the deep end. Like there is a point in the book where it becomes mustache twirly villain monologues, and it just is like, wow, you really want me to believe that this person did all of these things, and it just like doesn't make sense. I get that you're supposed to suspend your disbelief, but I couldn't for this. Donis is supposed to be really smart, but she does a lot of dumb things. Oh my gosh, she does this thing where she's like, I need to tell the people in charge of the investigation about this. I found a clue. I'm going to tell them. They're in a safe place. They're like, okay, you can tell us this. And she's in her mind is going, this is important for me to tell them. And then all of a sudden just changes her mind and is like, no, I can't tell them. And it's not like personal information. It's not like they're in an area where, you know, somebody might overhear or any other reason. She just all of a sudden is like, no, I can't tell them. And that bugged me so much, and it happened so often that you could have cut, the book was so long, you could have cut that out so many times. Anytime she does that, you could have cut it out and the book would be like 100 pages shorter. She has this whole through line of like not feeling accepted in the Ojibwe community because she was raised by her white family. Her father's not on her birth certificate, so she's not able to be like a registered member of the community. She can't vote in the tribal councils. There are certain things that she's like being barred from, but it never fully felt like she was being barred from these things. because like she is the resident expert for the investigation of the Ojibwe community. Like she believes in the practices, she knows the medicine, she knows the gods, the stories, or is it God, one god? It's creator, the creator. She like knows all the stories. She understands the culture. It feels like nothing was really being gate kept from her. Again, there were a few things that she was told she couldn't do, but like, I don't know. It just never felt fully like she wasn't accepted. Like the biggest relationship she had was with the elders of the community. So she felt like accepted by me, but maybe I'm missing something. I'm not sure. I don't have a physical copy because I read this on audiobook on Libby while I was making dinner. Brokeback Mountain by Annie Proulx, I think is how you say her name. They said it multiple times in the audiobook. I think it's Proulx. Full transparency, I've never seen the movie. I probably should, especially now that I've read the book. I also didn't know it was a book. I also didn't know that it was actually a short story in an anthology, so it's only 55 pages and the audiobook is only an hour long. I highly recommend, if you haven't read it, you totally should. It will take you like no time at all to read. It is such an interesting short story. I love short stories. I love what they can do, and this one was a good example of how a short story can make you feel a full lifetime. Commonly called the gay cowboy movie, it is about two cowboys who meet on a ranching job and just are soulmates at some point. It's not just about sex. It's not just about like being closeted. It's something deeper. They go on to have wives and have children and not see each other for years. And as soon as they see each other, that spark is right there again. And it's beautiful and it's so sad. And I don't know what else to say without it being like really, really spoilery, but oh my God. I highly recommend, if you haven't looked into it. I don't know about the movie. Everyone loves the movie, so maybe go watch the movie too. I probably should do that too. They struggle with internalized homophobia. They struggle with the fear of being seen as who they truly are. It's beautiful. Love it. We're getting to the end. The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenson. I really, 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 really wanted The Starless Sea to be part of my August wrap up. And in a twisted way, it is, because I had to DNF this. I could have finished it because I DNF'd it like a few days before the end of August. I had to DNF it. So Erin Morgenson, previously known for The Night Circus. I read The Night Circus when I was in high school. I loved the story. I loved the writing style. I had a very like weird circus phase as a kid. I don't know what it was, but I thought circuses and magicians were so cool. And that like really scratched an itch for me. And then it got to a certain point at the end where I just hated it. I don't even remember what it was, but there was some decision, some character action that made me hate the entire rest of the book, and it soured my experience with The Night Circus, and I never wanted to read the book again, and I never wanted to see the book again. I do not hate quietly. I have to hate loudly, and I need everyone else to hate the same things as me. Anyway, The Starless Sea came out, realized it was the same author, and was like, oh, I probably won't like it anyway. Years later, I see it in the thrift store for like $1, so I'm like, might as well. I mean, give her another shot. It's been years. Everyone says that they love this book. Like, it has been in the shelves of every booktuber, book TikToker I've ever seen. And they all love it. So they're all raving about it. I'm like, I'll give her one more chance, right? This is supposed to be about two rival secret societies that are book-based, somehow storybook-based. I'm not exactly sure. And then there's this special man, Zachary Ezra Rollins, and he is stuck in between them. At one point, I was at a company event, and people were asking me about the book and like what I thought of it, what it was about, and I just like couldn't tell them because it's so frustrating and difficult to explain. Because yes, it's about like the main story with Zachary and these two rival secret societies. So like every other chapter is a short story of a fable or folktale or excerpt of a book that's one of the books within this book. And so I assume that they are somehow loosely connected to the main story, but it was so annoying and frustrating to read because the chapters are already so short. So we would get like very, very minimal time with Zachary and the main story. And then we would have another short story that doesn't connect to the main story. And then on top of that, it was so repetitive. Oh my God. I was halfway through the book and they just had basically repeated the same mission twice and had to do the same ritual twice. And it just like, so annoying to get through. The book's already like close to 600 pages. I just like could not sit through it and waste more time reading these books. It felt very much like an early 2000s action adventure movie where there's this like special guy or chosen one that's a fish out of water, bumbling around, being dragged from place to place, just asking questions that never get answered. And then maybe there's like these people who have been in the society or the secret, whatever it is, and they know everything, but they're like not answering his questions, even though it'd be so much simpler to just tell him what he needs to know. And then on top of that, there's just like magical remedies that just so happen to work for everything. Like she enters a Starbucks and orders a secret thing and then gets the passcode to the rival thing. And he's like, how did you get that? How did you know you would get the passcode to the door of this enemy society? And she's like, don't ask questions. And it's like, at one point he gets poisoned and she's like, here, it's an antidote. And he's like, you just happen to have an antidote to a poison. You don't know what the poison is. And she's like, well, I've never seen it not work on anything before. And it's like, shut the fuck. You just magically happen to have everything. And then when he's like, oh, you just magically have it, she's like, don't say the M word. It's not magic. Yes, it is. I hate it. It got under my skin. I gotta calm down. Okay. When I looked at some of the other reviews, that was like unanimous. Across the board, everyone was like, the writing and the descriptions were super cool. The writing style was amazing. It has that perfect mix of floral language, of fairy tale folklore language, but then also being modern and having a cute little like reference here or there. It was like beautiful mix of that. The concept was also really cool. Like the idea of a secret society with these doors, these magical doors that bring you places. And then like the books are magical and are somehow super important. And I see that concept all the time. I see the other people saying that concept would be really cool for a book, but you rarely actually see books that do that. And unfortunately, this book's execution of that concept was not for me. And it was very frustrating to read. And I think I've given her 2 chances now. I think Erin Morgenson is just not for me. Last but not least, A Short Stay in Hell. This is another short story. I do love me some good novellas and short stories. This, as you can tell, is about hell. This is an afterlife story. Zoroastrianism was the only true religion, and if you did not practice it in life, you immediately went straight to hell, but the variations of hell were different, so I think it was tailored to the certain people. Our main character, does he have a name? I can't remember. Oh, I don't know. He might have had a name. Gets sent to basically the Library of Babel. The Library of Babel is this idea, this concept, this hell, where every book that was written or could ever be written at any point in time exists, and their promise is that they have to find their life story, and it has to be exact. It can't have any changes. And at first I was like, oh, okay, so it's just different versions of people's life stories, but they're not exactly correct. No, there are billions upon billions of books because they're like gibberish. Like most of them are gibberish. You know that whole idea of like monkeys at a typewriter and eventually they'll write Shakespeare? It's like that because like it is every single combination of every character in the English language ever put together, and that number is astronomical, and it's terrifying. The more they described it and explained what the actual library was about, the worse it got. Like, the worse I was like, oh my god, this actually is hell. It delves into eternity, like the concept of eternity, insanity, the futility of your actions, and monotony. One of the big things about this hell is that everyone here is like a white American who died during like this certain time period. It's like weird that they all speak English and they're all white Americans and they all kind of lived in the same time frame, but like that's part of the monotony. There was not a person of color. There was not somebody different than them. At one point, the character gets into a relationship with somebody and it lasts 1,000 years, but in eternity, 1,000 years is a drop in the bucket. And the more I think about it, the worse it gets. Like, the book is amazing, but like the worse I feel, the more anxiety I get. I don't like it. It basically gave me an existential crisis, but it was well done. A well done existential crisis. And again, I don't want to think about it too long. If you're into short stories, if you're into the afterlife, it would be a really, really good book if you like things like No Exit or The Good Place. That's going to be it from me. How did you like me rambling about what was that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 books that I experienced this month? Did you like it? Do you think I was talking too much? Do you think this is too stupid and similar to other people's, too unoriginal, I guess? Or did you find it fun? Oh wait, I forgot which ones were Dollar Tree books. I think it was just The Witness for the Dead and Hana Carries On were both Dollar Tree books. I think that's gonna be it for me. Alright, bye! Hi. How are you? No, you're good. Are you going to be cooking?
I'll probably just make a sandwich.
Okay, well, I'm going to ignore you.